betting markets have moved in the direction of Clinton. So the momentum was with Trump. I recently added to my bet on Trump when the odds were 3.4. They've gotten worse. So they're now just 4.3. I'll just look at the probabilities. And you can see after bottoming at about 13%, he jumped up to maybe 31, 32, but subsequently he's fallen back to here. As a chartist, this could be a 50% pullback. The markets don't move in a straight line. And often it'll go up, so you have the low there, the high there, and it'll shake out the scared money. So it'll shake out the people who are easily scared. So often it'll go 2 steps forward, 1 step back, then it'll go again 2 steps forward. You can see that kind of thing here. It was going up. It had a big pullback, but it was very brief. It was here. This was the high. It fell back to halfway between the high and the low, and then it continued up. So all these things are not hard fast. So it's not absolute certainty, or it's always wrong, which is not something that we're used to, unless you're a trader. You have to, but it's something you have to train your mind to be able to do or cope with, and it's always a struggle because you can stubbornly just go, oh, it's going to turn around, but it might not, and you'll just keep losing and losing and losing. That's why, remember, when the probability for Trump fell below these lows, I got out of my bet. I placed these bets. So I took a small loss rather than hold on to it stubbornly and going, oh no, it's going to turn around, because experience has shown, when you buy a share and it folds and folds and folds, you can lose a lot more. It's better in the long run to just take a small knock and move on, because there's always other bets to do. Of course, people might more be concerned about the particular, is it going to be Trump or Clinton? It's going to be the end of the world and all that. But from a quant perspective, from my perspective, from this bet's perspective, it's just a bet. So you've got to detach yourself from the details. So anyway, it has fallen, depending on where you are. So what you should do depends on where you are. So I don't think it's fallen enough that I'm going to be kind of closing this bet. If I hadn't placed a bet yet, I might, because again, I still think it's going to be closer. And just as an example of how confident I am on that, or how certain I am of this, I'm talking about bets of €20. So it's not like I'm betting 10,000 or 100,000 or lots of money. So that's what today's developments in the betting market. So Trump's odds have gotten worse. Like, the probability of him becoming president is now lower. So if I look at the polls, Clinton's 1.8 ahead, which is pretty close to within error. Remember, I think last time the polls had things as neck and neck, but Obama ended up with a 3% lead or something. So what the polls say and what the actual answer is going to be can vary easily by 3. So having a lead of 1.8, I mean, you'd rather have a lead, but it doesn't mean that you're going to win by 1.8. Also, we can just look at the most recent polls. So the most recent poll has Trump in the lead. The one before that was a tie, and the 2 before that had Clinton in the lead. And I think yesterday, I think we had 4. There are more with Clinton in the lead than Trump. Again, she does have a 1.8 lead, so you'd expect that. If I look at the no toss-up, Clinton has 297 compared to Trump only having 241. So like yesterday, that really comes down to Florida. Clinton is slightly ahead in Florida, and at other times Trump is slightly ahead, because they're very close. Florida has 29 votes. So if we did another poll, there's a good chance that would have Trump in the lead. And if he got those 29, he'd be at 270, and that's enough. So Florida is so important. Another thing I just wanted to finish up on was, I meant to do something on this earlier on, but there was always developments going on. Is the whole betting markets versus polls. So, I just type in Google, you can do a search yourself, and I just clicked on a paper. So, yes, it's 2012, but I mean, that's pretty recent. Recent enough. It looks interesting. I mean, it's on the kind of thing that I was looking to find out. So, prediction markets in the US, you've got Predicted, which we looked at yesterday, I think. Here we have the betting markets. Basically the same thing. So they've drawn considerable attention in recent years as a tool for forecasting elections. But how accurate are they? Do they outperform the polls? Which is the $64,000 question. Okay, probably hundreds of millions or billions question, but that's the expression. So that's the thing. I mean, we've got conflicting polls are saying it's very close. The betting markets are saying Clinton has a 70% plus probability of winning. So do they outperform the polls, as some scholars argue? Do prices in election markets, or in our case, betting markets, carry information beyond the horse race in the election polls? This paper assesses the accuracy of US presidential election betting markets in years before and after opinion polling was introduced. So this is exactly the kind of what I wanted to know. Our results are provocative. First, we find that market prices are far better predictors in the period without polls than when polls were available. Sorry, I have to read that again. We find that the betting markets are far better predictors in the period without polls than when polls were available. Okay, so nowadays we have a constant flow of what the polls are. Before they existed, the betting markets were out there, and so you could get a gauge of what the polls were later going to, and nowadays, I think it's since 2000 we've had a constant flow in the US. So before we had polls, betting markets were a good gauge. Second, we find that market prices of the pre-poll era predicted elections almost on par with polls, following the introduction of scientific polling. That makes sense. Because I've been mentioning that polls are all about trying to measure correctly. They use the best techniques. They try and identify where the errors are coming from, how they can reduce that, all this kind of stuff. So I would hope that the scientific polling would be more accurate. So basically, before they had nice developed scientific polling, betting markets were better. Now betting markets don't do any better, because the betting market people would have access to the polling data. So you'd hope that you do as well. Finally, when we have both market prices and polls, prices add nothing to election prediction beyond polls. So the betting markets don't have evidence of showing greater insight than the polls. Okay. Finally, okay. To be sure, early election markets were surprisingly good at extracting without scientific polling. Okay, yeah. So basically, when people didn't know the scientific methods for polling, when it hadn't matured, when you had wasn't it Gallup who did the whole thing of actually doing a representative sample, because you had this magazine which had a big readership, and one group did a poll of millions of people, while Gallup only had maybe a couple of thousand. But Gallup's result was far more accurate, because it turned out that magazine, where they polled millions of people, was basically a magazine that was read more by Republicans or whatever. So as in, if you sample 20 million Republicans, your polls will tell you that Republicans are winning. You want to do a random sample so that you also have the correct number of Democrats and Republicans and all that kind of stuff, which is how polling has matured over the last 10, 20, 30, whatever years. So that would suggest to me that really stick with the polls. If you look at the markets and the betting community, of course you want to feel that, well, my community is the smart community. We're the group who are in the know. Data doesn't really support that. So if that's the case, then I'm going to believe the polls more than I'm going to believe the betting markets. And so now that would stick also. That's great for me because that agrees with what I've been doing. Then that would suggest that the polls are saying that things are close. That, Clinton's lead is 1.8, which is kind of within error. Yet the betting markets are saying that she has a 70% chance of winning or whatever. So I would be comfortable with my position of betting on Trump, because hopefully the odds will narrow as we get closer to the election, giving me an opportunity to hedge so that if Trump wins, I win my bet, and if Clinton wins and I have my hedge in place, I don't lose anything. So that's the kind of strategy that I want to use. Only a few days left.